Have you ever sat down to plan a solo trip and then just closed the laptop again? Not because you didn't want to go, but because it suddenly felt like way too much. Too many decisions, too many tabs open, too many what-ifs shouting over each other. 15 browser tabs, 3 spreadsheets you'll never actually use, and somehow still no closer to booking anything. Because yeah, same here. And I actually think that's the real reason so many of us never book that first solo trip. It's not that we don't want to go, it's that planning itself feels like its own mountain to climb before we've even left the house. So today I want to hand you the exact system I use, every single time, still now, 5 years in and 24 countries later. Because once you've got a process to follow, your anxious brain has a lot less room to spiral. Welcome back to The Anxious Solo Female Traveller. I'm Katie, and this is the podcast for women who dream of solo travel, but anxiety, overthinking, or 100 different what-ifs have kept that dream firmly on the maybe someday list. If you're new here, quick bit of context. I've solo travelled to 24 countries now, with anxiety and social anxiety along for every single one of them. It's never gone away. I still overthink, I still check things far too many times, I still get that feeling of why did I book this again before pretty much every single trip. But I go anyway. And today's episode is a practical one, because I get asked this a lot. Katie, how do you actually plan a solo trip without it turning into a 3-week anxiety spiral? So I'm going to walk you through it, step by step. And I should say that most how to plan a solo trip content out there is written by people who just don't feel it the way that we do. The ones who genuinely do just throw a backpack on and go, which is honestly so great for them. But it's not helpful when you're the kind of person who needs to know exactly what bus to take before you've even landed. So this episode is for the planners, the overthinkers, and the ones who feel calmer with a system in place, not less calm because of one. Okay, so first, let's talk about why most how to plan your first solo trip advice doesn't really work. Or at least not if you're anxious. Because most of it is basically just a checklist. Book flights, book a hotel, buy insurance, pack your bag. Which fine, sure, it's all stuff that you'll need to do at some point. But here's the problem with just handing someone a checklist. It assumes that the only thing standing between you and booking is information. Like once you know what to do, you'll just do it. But if you're anxious, like me, you already know that that's not how it works, right? Because you've probably already read the blog posts, saved the destination reels, got 50 Pinterest boards of places you want to go. In other words, you're not short on information. What's actually stopping you is the fear that shows up the second you try to actually book something. And a list of tasks does absolutely nothing for that part. And honestly, I think this is why so many people give up on planning their trip altogether and just go back to scrolling. Because they tried the checklist. It didn't work, and they assumed that meant something was wrong with them. But it's not you, it's just the wrong tool for the job. So a few years ago, I built something that handles both, the logistics and the feelings underneath them. I call it my Dream to Departure roadmap, and it's got 7 stages, refined over 24 countries of me genuinely doing this myself. So let's go through them one at a time, and I'll tell you exactly where my brain tends to panic at each one and what I do about it. Stage 1 is to dream, and this stage is just about possibility. So not decisions or logistics, just dreaming. So this is your Pinterest boards, your one day I'd love to see the Northern Lights dream, or your bookmarked blog posts. Honestly, just let yourself enjoy this bit. Because I think a lot of us skip straight past dreaming because we feel guilty for dreaming about something we're scared to actually do. But you're allowed to want something before you're ready for it. So don't rush this stage, let it be fun. Stage 2 is to decide, and this is where it gets a bit more real. You pick one destination and one set of dates. And here's the trap I fell into for years, waiting for my fear to calm down before I chose. It doesn't work like that though. The fear doesn't go quiet just because you've picked somewhere. If anything, it gets a little louder for a bit because now the trip is real. So you choose anyway, while still feeling nervous about it. And you should know that that's completely normal and honestly to be expected. Here's your permission slip if you need one, that you're allowed to pick somewhere just because it looks nice. You don't need a perfect, fully justified reason for the destination or even the dates. I saw a photo of this place and I couldn't stop thinking about it is a completely valid reason to decide, and I have decided my own solo trips like that many times. Stage 3 is to book, so flights, accommodation, insurance. This is where the checklist comes in, and those are the most important 3. But I want you to hear this first. You are looking for a good enough option, not a perfect option. Because I have absolutely lost hours, days probably, of my life comparing meaningless, tiny details between 2 hotels that were both fine. Both totally fine. And all that comparing did was give my anxiety more time to talk me out of the whole trip. So set yourself a limit. Genuinely give yourself an hour, maybe 2, to compare your top few options, and then book one. Because here's what I've noticed my own brain does. The longer I compare, the more small, irrelevant details it decides are actually massive red flags. So one review mentions the pillows were a bit flat, and suddenly my brain's decided that the entire hotel is a mistake. And no, I'm not kidding, that was a real decision I made on my last solo trip to Croatia. So a time limit isn't about being reckless. It's about not giving our anxiety endless hours to invent problems that don't even exist. Now, quick pause here because I also want to share something that's become part of my own booking process. It's a tiny thing on the surface, but it makes a huge difference. Before I book anywhere to stay, I walk the neighbourhood first, on Google Street View. It takes about 5 minutes, and here's how. You pop the address into Google Maps and zoom out a bit to see the surrounding streets. Then drag that little Street View icon onto the road that your accommodation is on. And you just have a look around. Is it well lit? Is there a clear entrance? Are there shops or restaurants nearby so that you get a signal that there will actually be people around? Would you feel okay walking this route after dark? If it all looks comfortable, then great, go ahead and book it. But if something feels a bit off, even if you can't quite explain why, you don't have to ignore that. You can just book somewhere else. I started doing this after I booked accommodation in Nice in France that left me really uncomfortable once I actually got there, because it was down this tiny, isolated little alley. And genuinely, I've lost count of the places I've cancelled since, purely because they didn't pass the Street View test. Never once regretted it. So that's a completely free thing you can start doing on your very next trip. No apps, no cost, just 5 minutes and a bit of scrolling, which we all love, right? Okay, so stage 4 of my 7-step roadmap is to plan. And this is about building your loose itinerary. And I really want to stress the word loose there. This is not a minute-by-minute schedule, because a schedule that tight leaves you absolutely no room to breathe or change your mind or have a lazy morning just because you're tired. And trust me, I say this with just a little bit of pain because I love a plan. But you can plan the big things, your must-see moments, your non-negotiable activities, your day tours that you want to join, but then also leave gaps on purpose. And I know that that can feel a little bit uncomfortable if you're someone who likes certainty. An empty gap in the itinerary can feel almost dangerous. Like, what am I supposed to do with that unplanned time? But an empty afternoon or even an hour or 2 isn't a problem to be solved. It's just space. Space to wander where your feet take you. Space to rest. Space to decide what you fancy doing once you're actually there and you know how you're feeling that day. Stage 5 is to prepare. So this is sorting your arrival plan, your packing, and your safety essentials. And here's my tip for this. Do this stage early, not the night before. Because the night before a solo trip is where your anxiety has the absolute least patience for anything going wrong. So if your charger's missing or you can't find your travel adapter at 11 p.m. the night before you fly, your brain is going to treat that like an emergency. Sort it earlier and give yourself a calmer night before you go. I actually keep a running note on my phone for this now, and I add to it the second I think of something, weeks before I travel. So adapter, print the boarding pass just in case, screenshot the accommodation address in the local language so I can show it to a taxi driver if I need to. None of that is exciting, but it's the kind of boring preparation that means on departure day, your brain has a lot less to panic about. And then stage 6 is to go. And again, follow your plan loosely and give yourself full permission to change it. This one sounds obvious, but I think it's honestly one of the hardest for anxious planners, myself included, because we plan so carefully that we can start to feel trapped by the plan itself, like changing it would be failing somehow. But you're allowed to skip the museum because you're tired. You're allowed to stay an extra hour at the cafe you've found because you're having a nice time. And you're allowed to completely change day 3 because day 2 went completely differently than you expected. I mean, you're supposed to actually enjoy this, right? Not feel locked into something that stopped working on day 2. And honestly, some of my favourite moments from any solo trip have come from completely abandoning the plan. You just have to remember that the plan is there to support you, not to be the boss of you. And the final stage, stage 7, is to reflect. And this is the one I think gets skipped the most. But honestly, it might be one of the most important. Once you're home, take a few moments to write down what you've actually achieved. Not what went wrong, but what you handled. Because this is where your confidence for the next trip actually gets built. Not from the trip going perfectly, but from you proving to yourself in writing that you handled it. And you don't need to feel completely ready for one stage before you move to the next one, by the way. You just need to have done enough of it to take the next step. That's genuinely it. Now, I want to share one more tool with you because it made the single biggest difference to me. And it's called the What If reframe. And here's the problem it solves. Anxiety thrives on unanswered questions. So one what if then turns into 10 worse ones, and suddenly you're 3 what ifs deep at 2 a.m. and nowhere near a plan. So instead, ask yourself 4 questions. And let's use a really common one as an example. So, what if I get lost? Question 1, what's the realistic likelihood of this? And for getting lost, honestly, moderate. It's completely normal to take a wrong turn somewhere new. Question 2, if it happened, what would I actually do? Well, I'd stop and find somewhere safe to pause to check my map. If I'm still unsure, I'd ask in a shop or at a tourist information point. Question 3, who or what could help? So for me, offline Google Maps could help, or asking a local, or going to a tourist information centre. And finally, question 4, what's a more balanced way to think about this? Well, getting lost doesn't mean that I can't solo travel. It's normal, and it's completely fixable. Notice how that doesn't end with, and then the whole trip was ruined. It ends with a plan. And that's the whole point of this exercise. Not proving that nothing will go wrong, because sadly that's just not possible. But proving to yourself that even if it does, you are capable of handling it. That's genuinely how you turn anxiety into action. Let's try one more example. So, what if I don't make any friends and I'm lonely for the whole trip? Realistic likelihood, honestly moderate, especially on a short trip. Loneliness can absolutely show up. What would I actually do? Well, I'd remind myself that loneliness is a feeling and not an emergency, and it does pass. I'd join a walking tour or just message a friend back home for a bit of connection. Who or what could help? Group tours, hostel common rooms if you're staying in one, a simple hello to another traveller on a tour. And a more balanced way to think about it? Feeling lonely for an hour doesn't undo the whole trip. It's just 1 hour inside a much bigger experience. See how that works exactly the same way, whatever the fear actually is. So try that with your biggest what if this week. Work it through those 4 questions and see how much smaller it feels once it's actually named, instead of just floating around as one big, vague feeling of dread. So, a quick recap, because I know that was a lot and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by it, which would be a bit ironic given the topic. Dream, decide, book, plan, prepare, go, reflect. 7 stages, 1 at a time. Walk the neighbourhood on Street View before you book any accommodation. And when a what if gets loud, run it through those 4 important questions instead of letting it spiral. And that's genuinely the whole system. It's the one I still use 24 countries in. And I want to be really honest about something, because I don't want you to think I've got this perfected and somehow you're behind. I still get stuck, at stage 2 especially, more times than I can count. I still often spend way too long comparing hotels that I've already decided are both fine. The system doesn't remove the anxiety. Nothing genuinely does. Not even for me this many trips in. What it does do is give that anxiety somewhere to go, instead of just spiralling in every direction. Because that's a one-way ticket to overwhelm. Before we wrap up, here's your 1 small step for this week. Just pick 1 stage, dream, decide, whichever one you're actually at right now, and do 1 small action towards it. Just 1 thing. Because overwhelm usually isn't about having too much to do. It's about knowing what to do right now. So fix that 1 thing, and everything else gets a little bit easier to face. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I want to do this, but I don't know where to begin, that's exactly why I built my free email course, 7 days to your first solo trip, even if you're anxious. It walks you through 1 small, doable step each day, so you're never trying to take on the whole roadmap at once. It's completely free, and honestly, it's the guide I wish someone had handed me before my own very first solo trip. Back when I was still waiting for confidence to just show up on its own. I'll pop the link in the show notes or the description if you're watching on YouTube. And in the next episode, we're getting into a question I think almost every solo traveller has asked at some point. Is it dangerous to travel alone as a woman? If that sounds like something you need, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next episode.